Welcome back to the Life on Books podcast. I'm your host, Tony. With me, as always, is Andy, a.k.a. Metafictional Meathead. And today we are not in my kitchen. We are in Andy's...
library, office, study.
Yeah, we're at Andy's place.
Today, Andy's library at Andy's.
Yeah, we didn't really think that through. Today we're going to be talking about what does it mean to be well-read, and what are some books or authors that we haven't read that might surprise people or that we want to read that we haven't gotten around to. But as always, we will start with, what are you currently reading? You can go first.
You know what, Tony? We're in my home today. Why don't you go first?
Wow, okay. I love that.
Why don't you lead the charge?
Sure. So I'm currently reading 3 or 4 books. I'm reading a book called Vulture, Capitalism by Grace Blakeley. She's a British journalist. The book is about more or less what it sounds like, some of the negative aspects of capitalism, because I don't think vultures have a super positive connotation in our nomenclature, although they are very cool birds. Probably my favorite bird, although perhaps soon to be overtaken by the stork-billed or shoe-billed stork. Did you see that video?
No.
For whatever
My
reason...
avian knowledge apparently is lacking compared to yours.
Yeah, this is extremely tangential, but hey, that's what you're going to get today. So it's been making the rounds on social media for whatever reason, but it's a 5-foot tall stork-looking bird with a giant, like football-sized bill, and it's a carnivore. It eats mostly fish, but it has been known to eat like small monkeys even.
That's hardcore.
Yeah.
That's
and
metal.
It clacks its bill, and it literally sounds like an AK-47.
Okay.
It's terrifying.
That's insane.
It has a 7-foot wingspan. It literally looks like a dinosaur, and supposedly it comes from the same lineage of like the T-Rex.
No way.
Yeah. So
that's insane.
Yeah.
All right. In the comments, leave your top 3 favorite birds.
Yeah.
And what you like about them.
So vultures for a long time have been my favorite bird, because they're badass birds. Actually, they're super intelligent. But a lot of people don't know this. They have this crazy stomach acid that can just like break down basically anything. And so they eat a lot of dead animals, and animals that have died from some sort of disease. And the stomach acid destroys the bacteria or the viruses, so that the birds themselves don't get sick, and they actually stop the spread of a lot of disease in the animal kingdom, which I think is badass.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So
I'm a big birds aren't real guy.
Right.
Government spy drones.
Yes.
If it flies, it spies.
If it flies, it spies. So I'm reading Vulture Capitalism. What I love about it so far, I'm about a third of the way through, is that we have this false dichotomy of belief around political systems in the United States, where it's like, if not capitalism, then communism. And people kind of think of socialism as communism light. And I guess in some ways, depending on your definitions, it can be that. But she really does a lot to break down the arguments of what capitalism really is and what socialism really is. And I think a lot of times when people argue about these topics, they're not arguing based off the same, a shared definition. And so the conversations can never progress, where it's like if we agreed on definitions first and then move forward, I actually think a lot of people who call themselves capitalists, or at the very least think they're anti-socialist, would find that they're not actually anti-socialist.
Yeah.
And so a little bit of a spoiler on the book, she talks about how during the pandemic, billionaires in America increased their overall combined net worth by 70%, which that stat by itself is insane when you think about how many people died, how many people lost their jobs, how many people lost their homes, and in general, how much more expensive just the cost of living in America became. And somehow when the vast majority of us are having a more difficult time, like billionaires became more wealthy. And so she explains how basically extremely wealthy people who own large corporations, more or less colluded with the U.S. government to accrue that wealth. And then
That's shocking.
yeah, right. But then, because the government sent out like stimulus checks of $1,200, everyone's like, our government's socialist,
Right.
socialism's ruining the country. And it's like, no, guys, like that was like a Band-Aid to basically keep people from rioting in the streets.
I bought an Apple Watch with that. Like, it's not
right. So, that's great so far. I'm really enjoying it. She's an excellent writer. She makes the concepts, I think, very easy to understand. The book seems well cited. I haven't gone through and checked every single reference yet, but almost every paragraph has a citation, which is good.
Nice.
And then I'm also still working on Musashi. I just read a little bit when I get around to it. And I just started Broughtupsy by Christina Cooke. They are a Jamaican author who is currently living in Canada, I believe, and they know Escort.
Oh,
and they are.
Did he put you onto that book, or was it just kind of a
heard
about it?
Christina messaged me, and I looked into it. I said, "Yeah, it sounds like something not necessarily I would go out of my way to read, but something I'd be open to reading."
Yeah.
And they are also a graduate from the Iowa Writers Workshop, which is never.
Yeah, I saw that one on your shelf when you posted your fiction tour the other day, and I had never heard of it, never seen anything about it before, and I think I saw someone commenting about it.
Yeah, it's good so far. I'm 50 pages in. It's short. It's maybe only 230 pages. I just started it yesterday, and then I also just finished The Brother by Raud. I don't know. He's an Estonian author. Super short, 118 page novella, kind of a spaghetti western, and
Cool,
fun book. I have some critiques about it, which I don't want to get into. It's just not really worth it on this episode. But overall, I liked it. But I was like, dude, you could have made this a 300-page book, and it would have probably been really good. Great writing, though. Very poetic.
What was the title again?
The Brother.
The Brother.
Yeah. And so I was like looking at my shelf, and I was like, oh, what? I totally forgot I had bought it. It's a open letter publication. And I was like, I just wanted something I could bang out in an hour or two. And I was like, well, this thing's very thin.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, he's Estonian. Cool. I can check that off from my Read the World project. And it was great. So, yeah. What about yourself?
I'm reading 2 books right now. I ended up putting The Kibosh and Lost Empress by Sergio de la Pava.
Oh, wow.
I mean, it wasn't, it was just okay.
Yeah.
I think at a different time where, maybe I was kind of, still in like my reading habits of old, I would have kept going with it. But right now where I'm like still kind of getting back into daily reading or just at least consistent reading and trying to, get more than 10, 15 pages at a time. It just wasn't doing it for me in the sense that it wasn't holding my attention enough. And, I didn't feel that compulsion to read every day.
Yeah.
So I wanted to kind of switch it up and go for some new things. So the one of the books I'm reading right now, it's Tell Them of Battles, Kings and Elephants, or Elephants and Battles. I forget the order.
Sounds badass.
It is by Mathias Enard. He's a French author. And it is about Michelangelo going to Constantinople to design a bridge for the Sultan, kind of connecting, I think it's the Golden Horn, kind of going over a river, connecting parts of the city.
Yep.
And just kind of about him going there, his time in Constantinople, and some interactions of some lingering things he left behind in Rome, some quarreling with the Pope about ongoing projects that he just kind of said, screw it, the Sultan's going to pay me a lot of money. So it's a pretty short book. Most of the chapters are pretty short. Some of them are only like a page or two long. Like the longest I've come across is like 5.
Yeah.
But it's good writing. I read one of his novels last year and enjoyed it, and I came across it on the shelf randomly at Barnes and Noble, and I think I had seen that our good buddy Seth had posted about it and spoke highly of it. So I was like, I'll give this a try, and
I can be a sucker for a good title. That'll draw me in.
Yeah, I mean, and the title's cool. The cover's really cool too. I'm sure we can edit it in, but it's kind of like a panorama of Constantinople, and then it's just got like a stroke of paint kind of blocking out the city.
Cool.
So it looks pretty cool. And then the other book I'm reading, I recently started The Instructions by Adam Levin, which is a big, chunky. Yeah, it is just over 1,000 pages.
Yeah. And it's a tall book too.
Yeah, it was here. I'll
looks like you've made some good progress on it.
Yeah,
a third of the way, quarter of the way.
Just under 300 pages in. Yeah. So for comparison, next to my not sponsored Canon Monster,
I think it's big.
Yeah. So I had originally put this on my 2024 reading list, and McSweeney's, who published it, it came out in 2013, I believe, or 2010.
So it's not a new release.
It came out in 2010.
Yep.
McSweeney's is doing so it's a very unapologetically Jewish book. This edition is no longer in print, and for the reprint, McSweeney's is doing a bar mitzvah edition.
Oh wow!
The book is 13 years old.
Is that when bar mitzvahs happen? Okay,
yeah,
gotcha.
I think so. Maybe it's so I think they started kind of planning it last year, and then just with the means of production, it got delayed a little bit. But I was listening to a podcast the other day with Levin talking about just the book and kind of promoting the upcoming new edition, and I was like, this sounds like what I need right now. But it reminds me a little bit of JR, in the sense that the title or two of the protagonists from that book and the protagonists from this book are both young children. And it reminds me a lot of Infinite Jest as well, in the encyclopedic nature of it and the scope, and just the way it's so imaginative, and also there's a lot of pretty weighty and heavy kind of themes and discussions in there, just with a lot of like little wit and humor mixed in. Actually, I bookmarked a quote that I wanted to read really quickly. So to kind of set it up, so I know I messaged you about it. For anyone that's not familiar with the book, it is about a 10-year-old boy named Gurion, who may or may not be the next Messiah.
Love that. Love that for Gurion.
Who has a propensity for getting kicked out of various schools because of his violent tendencies.
Oh, good.
So he's in this he's at this other junior high or middle school, whatever, in this program called The Cage with other troubled special ed students, things like that, who for various reasons can't be in normal classes. But he is a very astute Jewish scholar and Torah scholar. And neither of his parents are both Jewish, but they're both kind of more on the secular side. So in this section, they were at a family friend's having celebrating Passover, having dinner, and he goes out for a walk with his father after dinner, kind of learns some information about his father at this dinner, and they're kind of discussing it afterwards. And Gurion is really struggling because he's torn between what he thinks is true and then trying to honor his father, because by honoring his father, he's going to kind of be going against some of his beliefs, and when he learns this information about his father's telling him this like one way to look at it, but he feels by perceiving it that way, he's not going to be honoring his father. So he has this like moral confliction.
Mm-hmm.
So they're out taking a walk. They wind up sitting in a cemetery, and they're talking about it. "How can you know so much," said my father, "and hear so much and speak so pristinely, and meanwhile be so completely muddled, Boychical? How is it that your loyalty enables you to justify everything your father does, but you go deaf when he's speaking to you? I am telling you that what I did was wrong, and you have to trust that I am correct. If for no other reason than I am your father, and you are to honor me, and to honor me, I'm telling you, you have to be a mensch. You do not need to prove to me that you are a good son. I believe it, Gorion. You are a good son, and I am glad that you are a good son, but a good son is not necessarily a good human being. A good son is just a son who is loyal to his father, and loyalty is not in itself goodness. And a good father would never teach his son otherwise. I want you to understand that. If you want to honor me, you will allow that I was wrong to take that man's life. You will call it a mistake, and after accepting it as a mistake, you will forgive me my mistake rather than claiming it a victory. You will love me despite my mistake. You will cease to be my apologist, and Gurion, I'm sorry. I thought we were talking. I'm sorry, Gurion. I got a little carried away. Come on. Why are you crying on poor Michael Weinberg?" Obviously, they're sitting in front of a grave with the name Michael Weinberg, and now the 10-year-old boy is crying on it. And I love that that juxtaposition of like, you know, pretty serious conversation and not just like a normal fatherly, why are you crying? But why are you crying on Michael Weinberg? Like it's just that added layer of wit and just
poor Michael Weinberg
turning it up a little bit, you know, it's stuff like that I really enjoy in a book. So
sounds cool.
I've really been drawn to it and enjoying it.
Nice.
So
are you going to pick up the bar mitzvah edition?
TBD, probably.
Yeah.
I mean, it looks like from what I've seen, it's going to be a really cool looking edition. It's going to be a 2-volume set too. So if I ever wanted to reread, I can save my wrist a little bit. So I probably will, but I'm going to, get a little bit deeper into this one before I make my decision.
Yeah.
I like where it's going, and I have a hard time imagining it's going to like totally fall off, but
I mean, you got
a
700
lot,
pages.
A lot can happen in 700 pages, you know?
Yeah. Cool. Anything else that you're reading currently?
No.
All right. Well, let's get into it. Yeah.
Let's do it.
So the topic of today is what does it mean to be well read? And are we well read? Spoiler alert, I'm not. I think by probably most people's definitions, certainly not by my, well, we'll get into that. So what does it mean to you, Andy, to be well read?
I was thinking about this last night. I think it comes down more to variety versus volume. If you read nothing but weird fiction like the instructions or pretentious stuff like Pynchon and Wallace, as I am kind of prone to do.
Yeah.
I think, reading those, you might get a little bit more of an expanded purview on things just because they cover a lot of topics, and obviously you're gonna approach a lot of tangential subjects reading those, but you are still kind of in one lane. Whereas if you're reading a little bit of that, you read some nonfiction, maybe you read some more genre fiction, you read some graphic novels, you read, this, that, and the next thing. You have a little bit more of a wider perspective. You read contemporary stuff, you read classics, things like that. I think it kind of comes down to like the variety of what you're reading. You just open yourself up to more topics and ideas.
Yeah.
But, I think if you, look at some of the, we've talked about it before, the popular books on like Bookstagram and TikTok and things like that, where, we've kind of called it like TV on paper.
Yeah.
And for the most part, all of those books seem to have the very similar plot, or at least plot structure. Kind of same sort of thing seems to happen in most of them. A lot of them follow like standard tropes to the point where like that's how they're being pitched at bookstores.
Right. Enemies to lovers.
Right.
Or yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Things like that. So I think if you read a lot of those, like you can read a lot of books, and we've seen some of those people where it's like, I read 300 books this year, and cool, you read a lot of books, and 60% of them have the same plot, just with different characters and mildly different writing.
Yeah.
I think something like that where you have read a lot of books, but you aren't necessarily exposed to a lot of ideas and topics. So I guess that would be my kind of roundabout definition.
Yeah, I don't know that I believe necessarily in the concept of it. The more I think about it, I think initially,
I'm not surprised that a nihilist like you doesn't believe in any.
Yeah, I have no beliefs. So I think, especially with myself, where I went to a college prep school for high school, and the kind of progression of English classes is very much like a westernized classical canon. And there's kind of like, it's almost like Pokemon, like you're trying to collect them all,
right?
Type of thing. Part of the reason I wanted to come, or what made me think to even do this topic, was I'm in this Facebook group for classic literature, and it's more or less disappointing than anything else. It's just a little boring. There's not a lot of like good discussion going on. But someone had said, I believe that, the great books aren't meant to be read, but reread. Who's with me, or something like that. And I commented, I was like, yeah, like rereading books can be great. I was like, I'm just not really big on like, kind of like saying how people should experience books.
Right.
Because it just, to me, it came across as very pretentious of like, oh, reading a book's not even good enough. The great ones must be read multiple times. And dude,
also, that kind of implies, what if you've never read that book? Like, to you, I've never read it, so it only counts if I reread it. So now, like...
Right. Exactly. So it definitely felt like pearl clutching and gatekeeping. And I just said, I think that's exactly what I said. I think rereading books can be great, but I'm just not really big on, kind of like telling people how they should do things, how they should experience books. And oh my God, you would think that I fucking punched this guy in the face. You would think that I cheated on this guy's, I slept with this guy's wife. And you know what I mean? Like, it was like people lost their minds. Oh, Tony, you're pompous and pretentious. Are you fucking serious? Some guy wrote like
unbelievable.
This is just like diatribe, just polysyllabic puffery about literature. I was like, yo, you guys need to chill the out. I mean, I think it's hilarious. You know how I am.
Right.
If people cop attitudes like that, it just ramps me up even more.
Right.
But, yeah, I think for a long time it kind of became like, or for a long time it has been, being well read is like, checking all those boxes.
Right.
And starting with the Iliad and Shakespeare, and then you have to, right. And then you go into 19th century.
Right.
And I do think it's important to read stuff from the past and to get a good sense of what has come before, because obviously most everything just builds on itself over time. But also, you see this a lot of times in music, right? Like, oh, you have to love and appreciate the Beatles to like modern rock or whatever. It's like, well, you don't really have to,
Right.
Like people are doing stuff now that has never been done before. And I think the same thing can be done with writing. So, and I often think about, the fact that I forget the woman's name, but at a certain point in time, much more recently than you would think, women were not allowed to compete in marathons because people actually believed if a woman ran a marathon, her uterus would fall out. And so the first woman to ever run a marathon literally went in drag, I guess, like dressed up as disguised herself as a man.
Wow.
And I think during the race, people realized what was happening and people like physically tried to stop her. Yeah. And so you start to think about something as absolutely ridiculous as that. And then you go, okay, well, is it really that important to read like all the big names from the past? Like, who are the people that made these lists? Who are the people that were even allowed to write or publish books?
Right.
I don't know. Like, so I do think, kind of that old school, like canon, I like pick half a dozen to a dozen of them, read them.
Yeah.
But, sometimes you'll come across someone and they'll be like, oh my God, you've never read, like, and they'll just say some name.
Right.
And it's just like, yeah, no, man, I don't know. There's only so much time in the world. I read 2 other authors from that same time period. I'm not saying it's identical, but it's not like I'm completely ignorant to how writing was done in the 1800s or whatever.
Right.
So I kind of do agree with you where it is more about, I guess, diversity, for lack of a better word. And also too, like, if you only read classics, you are really like missing out on what's actually happening in the world around you at present day.
Totally. Yeah.
So
yeah, I think it's one of those things that you should work backwards from. Like, instead of like, okay, I'm going to read the Iliad and the Odyssey and the Aeneid and Shakespeare so that then I can move to Dickens and the Russians and Austen and whoever. And then when I understand them, I'll move to the 20th century and, yada, yada, so on and so forth. Like, I think you should work backwards. Like, I didn't really get around to actually doing it for whatever reason, but there's a lot of similarities and things that Wallace pulled from Hamlet and Infinite Jest. And when I finished that, I was like, oh, I should, Hamlet's not like very long. Like, I should reread Hamlet because I think I read it in high school. Like, should reread Hamlet so then I can get a better understanding and appreciation of these things that are in this book that I really loved. And spoiler alert, I didn't end up reading Hamilton, or Hamlet, excuse me. But I think you can kind of work backwards from that because, if you are reading, start from the very beginning and reading all these old classics and texts or whatever, so that you can kind of move to the next level, then it kind of becomes a homework assignment. And, if that's your bag and you enjoy those types of books, like, go for it. But to me, that would get pretty stale and boring.
yeah.
Especially because I'm not particularly fond of those books from that time period. I think between some of the classes I took in high school and college, I read the Odyssey, or at least parts of it, 3 times. The Aeneid, same thing, 2 or 3 times. The Iliad once or twice. And you couldn't pay me enough to reread them.
Right.
Like, I don't care.
Yeah.
Aeneas is the biggest, whiniest baby in all of literature. And I will stand by that. And,
yeah.
I won't cite my sources because I haven't read it in forever and I'm not going to read it again. But he is a fucking crybaby. And the Odyssey kind of sucks. Like,
yeah.
If you read Ulysses and you're like, this was great, I really love this, I want to understand Joyce's source material, I'm going to go back to the Odyssey. Great, do it.
Yeah.
But you don't have to read the Odyssey to understand Ulysses.
Right.
And like also there's tons of reference and guidebooks about Ulysses that will explain the allusions and the connections without you having to reread or read the Odyssey.
Yeah.
Like, you know, but to kind of circle back to the question at hand, what does it mean to be well read? One of the other ways I was thinking about it, I don't remember if this was something that was a conversation we had on the air, or if it was just something you posted about in a reel. But I think it was just your reel, talking about how you had friends over and you start talking about books, and even if you're the only person in the room out of a group of 3 or 4 that has read that book, it leads you talking about that book leads to this person talking, you know, and it just kind of goes in a circle. I think being able to engage in a conversation like that kind of has you on the side of being well read.
Yeah.
You know, even if you haven't read, you know, I've maybe in the last 2 or 3 years, you know, just shy of 200 books or somewhere around there. Like in the grand scheme of world literature, that's not a lot of books.
Right.
You know, there's probably 400 or 500 books in this room with us.
Right.
You know, like, so like I said, it's not about volume, but it's about being able to take things from what you've read and kind of turn that into an engaging conversation.
Yeah. I mean, you and I certainly have read much more than the average person.
Right.
I think the average American reads, I want to say it's like it averages out to 7 books a year or something like that. But there's literally hundreds of thousands of people that don't read any books. And that average is just brought up by the people that read 150 books per year. I forget what the median is. It's like 2 or something like that. You know what I mean? So, but if you look at like my reading life has been so kind of odd. As a kid, I read a lot of like Animorphs,
Right.
and you know, like stupid like kids books, like or young adult books. But I did also read some books that were, you know, like I read a lot of Robert Cormier, and he wrote books about, we've talked about this before, suicide, Nazism and fascism, terrorism, like coming of age, sexuality, all kinds of stuff. And then in high school, you know, we looking back at it, you know, again, like I said earlier, I was going to a college preparatory high school. We read we stayed a lot in the 19th century and early 20th century. We didn't do a lot of like super old stuff, surprisingly.
Right.
I think a lot of that, I mean, it was a Catholic school, so we had theology class, and that was all about the Bible, obviously. But I think they were like, oh, that's good enough. You know what I mean? As far as the old stuff. And then as an adult, I mean, I read a ton of nonfiction, a ton of business books, so many books on training and nutrition.
Right.
And what's really, people might look at that and be like, well, that doesn't really count. But like, I mean, I found out about like, not found out, but like was inspired to read a Sportsman's Notebook by Turgenev from a training book.
Right.
Like the guy was talking about sets and reps, and he was just like, yeah, like this will make you into a man like Turgenev.
Right.
Sportsman's Notebook. You're like, what? All right. So, but that's all stuff that it kind of all compiles and makes your own perspective unique. Even though I might not have checked off as many boxes as someone who went to college for an English degree or pursued a master's degree or even PhD, obviously. The Lost episode with Krista was a great example. She's, you know, teaches English at the collegiate level, obviously has to be extremely well-versed in kind of the westernized canon. What's interesting to me, though, is a lot of times you don't ever see people mentioning, like, you have to read X, Y, or Z from this Asian culture. Like, we just totally, like, whitewash it, you know?
Right.
I guess you could say there's a lot of like Greek and Fertile Crescent type stuff, but it's like,
right.
It's all kind of whitewashed.
That's the other thing too. Like I haven't. It's been a while since I've looked into like what is actually on the Western canon.
Yeah.
But at some point, are we going to start including books from the last like 100 years?
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to sound like a, pretentious head up my own ass type of guy, but like at some point, we're going to talk about having Gravity's Rainbow as like a must read for serious.
Yeah.
Like I can't think of many other books like that really like
think about
have such this grand scope and this like.
Yeah. Think about Blood Meridian. It came out in the 80s.
Right.
Spoiler, it's about the slaughtering of Native Americans.
Right.
Probably like an important book for certainly American readers to know
it's
about.
Huge.
And I can't think of another book that's on a must-read classics list that covers that topic. Probably the most widely considered must-read on it is Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee by D. Brown, which came out in the 50s or 60s. But that's a nonfiction. Mm-hmm. It's a well-written book, but it is very academic.
Yeah.
And so I totally agree with you. It's like, when are we going to start taking some of these more recent works?
And I could be wrong.
Seriously.
Like some of these could be on a canonized list or something like that. But like
any high school kids watching this, if you're reading Blood Meridian in high school, let us know.
Yeah, I definitely didn't read Blood Meridian in high school.
No, I mean, we didn't even talk about an author like Cormac McCarthy, and that guy's been writing, had been writing for when I was in high school. He'd already been writing for 30 plus years at that point.
Right.
So.
I remember off the top of my head in high school, I read The Great Gatsby,
mm-hmm.
The Importance of Being Earnest.
Mm-hmm. Well, I have
Heart of Darkness.
Oh, wow, you did Heart of Darkness?
I hated Heart of Darkness when I was in high school.
I have the Penguin must-read classics as chosen by our readers, 100 books. So I can just read these, and we can say if we read them or not.
Okay.
So Pride and Prejudice.
Nope.
I haven't read it. To Kill a Mockingbird. I did that in high school.
I did that in high school.
Okay. I think that's very common.
Yeah.
Great
That's a good high school book.
Yeah.
Like that's you can teach a lot. And
Great Gatsby. We both did that in high school. 100 Years of Solitude. We both read it. When did you didn't read it in high school, did you?
No.
Okay, me either.
That's a rough book to teach to high school. There's a lot of incest in that.
In Cold Blood by Truman Capote. I have not read it.
Haven't read it.
I almost picked it up off the shelf the other day, but I grabbed Vulture Capitalism instead. Wide Sagrasso Sea. I have a copy of it, but by Gene Rice. Have you?
I haven't heard of it.
Oh, really? That's a fairly well-known classic. Brave New World. I read it, but not in high school.
Haven't read it. I think I actually got rid of my copy too.
Oh, really? It's a good read.
Yeah.
I liked it. Didn't love it.
Yeah.
I actually thought it was better than 1984.
That's one of those books where like I don't want to say like I get I get it. I get the point. Like it's one of those books that like is so popular and so well known that like I kind of get the message. Like and I'm sure that I don't mean that in the sense that like I don't need to read it.
Mm-hmm.
But in the sense that like I've heard so much about it, I feel like I have a cursory understanding of what is going on that I don't feel as interested in reading it.
Right.
I'm not trying to sound like I'm the smartest guy in the world. I know what the point is without having read it, but like,
right. I think that's legit. I mean, I wouldn't say there's necessarily anything about the writing that's so mind blowing that it's like, oh, who cares? Like you could argue, like, even if you understand the plot of Lolita, like Nabokov is such a great writer, you should still read it. I don't think it's like that.
And I feel the same way about 1984. Like Big Brother's bad.
Right. What I find interesting about both those books is like, depending on your politics, you could make it an argument for or against your political beliefs, depending on what type of like mental leaps you wanted to take.
Right.
But moving on with this list here, Le Capture the Castile by Dodie Smith. I've never even heard of that.
Nope.
Someone in the comments is going to be like, you idiots.
Yeah, we're going to get trashed.
Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. No, me either. Crime and Punishment.
Yep.
Did you read it in high school?
I read it in high school and I read it as an adult.
I did not read it in high school. I read part of it as an adult. I DNF'd because I really did not like it. The Secret History by Donna Tartt.
That's on the Penguin Classics
This
top 100?
this is chosen by the readers.
Oh, okay. I read it as an adult.
Those stupid readers. Did you like it?
Yeah. I liked it at the time. I think my taste might have probably changed since I read it. And, I don't think I would like bemoan it and think it's like a bad book or have any sort of really strong negative feelings about it.
You really didn't like the Goldfinch, though,
I didn't like the Goldfinch
That's
at
also
all.
Tartt, right?
Yeah. That book could have been 300 pages shorter.
Call of the Wild. We did read that in high school. I want to say I read it freshman year.
That's
Jack London,
right?
I barely remember it.
I think I read that after high school or while I was in college or something like that, just kind of on my own.
The Chrysalids by John Wyndham.
Nope.
I haven't read it either. Persuasion by Jane Austen.
Nope.
I haven't read it either. Moby Dick by Melville. We did that in high school.
You did that in high school?
Yeah. It was actually, if I remember correctly, it was on my AP summer reading list.
Damn.
And so I read it, and then I ended up switching out of AP. I told that story on my social media. I don't want to get into it today, but The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, C.S. Lewis. I've read that, but I don't know if it was it might have been before high school even.
Elementary school.
Yeah. To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf. Neither. The Death of the Heart by Elizabeth Bowen.
Never heard of that.
I picked up an Elizabeth Bowen book when we went to Gray Matter in Western Mass. I have not read it yet, though, and it wasn't that title. Tess of the Ubervilles by Thomas Hardy. Nope. I've never read any Hardy. Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, which I have read.
I have not read it.
I read that in high school.
I didn't read any of that.
The Master and the Margarita. You've read that.
I've read it.
Not in high school.
Just, on my own.
Okay.
Recently.
I have not read it. The Go-Between by L.P. Hartley.
Nope.
Never even heard of it. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. That was high school for me.
I haven't read that.
That's a pretty good one. I think that was the 60s that came out. Yeah, 62. You have a copy of it?
I might have gotten rid of that one.
1984.
Nope.
You haven't read it. Okay.
No.
I have. I did not read it in high school. That's definitely a book they wouldn't have taught at Catholic prep school. Buddenbrooks by Thomas Mann.
Definitely. I have not read that. I cannot imagine that being taught in high school.
The Grapes of Wrath by Steinbeck.
I read that. I read East of Eden in high school and read Grapes of Wrath
last year.
Yeah. And I think I read one other Steinbeck in high school.
I've probably read more Steinbeck than any other author, and I have not read Grapes of Wrath. That's like the one big one I still haven't read.
I was kind of let down by it, but we're getting off topic.
Yeah. Beloved by Toni Morrison.
I read that in high school. I detested it.
I have not read it.
Which I think I'm going to avoid getting some flack for that. I think it was more the way it was taught than the book itself. It is a subject matter wise. It is a difficult read.
I think there's a lot of talk about separating art from artists, and it's always about somebody that made a piece of art that everyone loves and the person's a scumbag.
Right.
It never gets talked about the other way. Like, you can appreciate Toni Morrison for who she was and what she did and not like her writing.
Right.
That's totally possible.
No, and I like I said, it's been so long, so I don't really remember any particular feelings about the book itself or the writing itself. I think it was one of those books that was very hard for me to appreciate as in an academic setting, or at least as an 18-year-old that had already been accepted to college and was pretty checked out.
Yeah,
senioritis,
yeah.
Yeah, I think, and maybe we'll talk about this a little bit more if we ever actually get around to the lists we prepped, but that her work is something I would like to get back to just to see if my opinion has changed or my experience is different.
Yeah, I'm sure it would be. I mean, life looks so much different as you age.
right.
The Code of the Worcesters by P.G.
Wodehouse?
Wodehouse?
Wodehouse? I think it's Wodehouse.
W-O-D-E. I never
That
heard
has
of
to be a
it.
typo. I'm almost positive it's P.G. Wodehouse, but I have not heard of that book nor read it.
Dracula by Bram Stoker. Lord of the Rings.
I've not read Lord of the Rings.
Really? I read that as a kid.
I have them over there on the shelf, but
They're good. I think that the whole all Tolkien stuff is great. The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. I read that in high school.
I read that in high school. I read it, or actually, I read it in. No, I was in high school. I feel like I read it on my own, like I read it in, I think, my sophomore year of high school. I think I might have read it like just kind of on my own later, or maybe when I was in college or something, just kind of for funsies.
Great Expectations by Dickens.
No.
I've read it. I read it as an adult. We did some Dickens in high school, but that wasn't one of them.
I think I might have started to read part of that one like years ago before I really was big into reading and just.
It's another one that's like, I liked it. I didn't love it.
Yeah.
I would never tell anyone that particular book. I think A Tale of Two Cities is, from what I've read of Dickens, I think that's his best work.
Mm-hmm.
Great Expectations is good, but here we go. Catch-22, Joseph Heller.
Right on.
You haven't read that yet.
I still haven't.
You suck. I'm just kidding. My favorite book, I read it 2 years ago.
Yeah.
We did not learn it.
No, I need to go back to it because I was definitely into it. And I was enjoying it. And the only reason I stopped reading it is because my copy of Abandoned Security got delivered much sooner than I expected. And my plan was to try and kind of balance the two of them out. And then I just fell in love with Abandoned Security.
Yeah. Understandable. It happens.
No,
I haven't read most of your favorite books.
No
either,
shade to Heller. Yeah.
The Age of Innocence by Edith Wharton.
I've not read that.
I've not read it either. Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe.
I haven't read it.
I thought you had read it. No?
No.
Oh. I have a copy. I have not read it either. Middlemarch by George Eliot. This was going to be, they did it in my AP class, but after I switched out to the dummy class.
Gotcha.
That's a beast of a book, I've heard. Midnight's Children by Salman Rushdie. I'm surprised that's the pick for Rushdie on here.
I mean, it's pretty well regarded book.
Oh, really?
I think.
I thought the Satanic Verses was like his number one. I mean, that could be on the list later on.
I think it is. I think it probably is, just because of the quote controversy behind it.
Right.
Probably his most well known.
Right.
But
because there's the hit out on him for that one, right?
The Fatwa.
The Fatwa, yeah. But you haven't read it?
No.
Me either. I haven't read any Rushdie.
That one, Midnight's Children, was a big favorite of Esker's.
Letting him down.
Sorry, buddy.
The Iliad by Homer. You've read it. I have not. Vanity Fair by William Makepeace Thackeray. Not familiar with that. Brideshead Revisited by Evelyn Waugh. I haven't read it. Catcher in the Rye. We did that in high school.
Didn't do that in high school.
Really? That's like a super popular high school book.
Yeah.
Alice's Adventures in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll. I've certainly read it, but I don't know when.
For this list, but
it's those dumb readers, man.
Yeah.
All you people out there reading books, you guys know what you're talking about. The Mill on the Floss by George Eliot.
I've never heard of that.
I've never heard of that title, but Barchester Towers by Anthony Trollope.
Never heard of it.
Not me either. Another Country by James Baldwin.
Heard of it. Haven't read it.
Same. Les Mis by Victor Hugo.
Haven't read it.
Haven't read it either. Although there is a UFC fighter named Victor Hugo fought last night.
Nice.
I couldn't believe it. He was Brazilian. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory by Roald Dahl. I have read.
I think I probably read it when I was a kid.
Yeah. The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton. I have read that, actually.
I read that in like 7th or 8th grade.
Yeah, I read it in school at some point as well. The Count of Monte Cristo by
haven't read it yet.
Such a good book. Got to read it. I did not read it in high school, I don't think.
That'd be a big book to teach to a high school class.
It is a big book. Ulysses, I haven't read it.
I've read it too many fucking times. It's stupid.
Ulysses, you read?
Oh, Ulysses. Sorry. No. I thought you said the Odyssey.
Oh.
Haven't read Ulysses.
Okay, that's fifth. Oh, here we go. East of Eden, we've both read.
Yeah.
You read it twice.
I read it. Yeah, I read it in high school, and then when we did a little reading group at the gym.
Yeah, that's when I read it for the first time. The Brothers K, we both DNF'd.
Yeah, I got like 300 pages in, and it was. It's funny because, you had shared your, I guess, disdain, for lack of a better word, for Dostoevsky much before we started this podcast, and I had read Crime and Punishment and just loved it and enjoyed every second of it. When you started, sharing that opinion, and I was like, man, what are you talking about? Like,
Yeah.
I was in on the hype, and then I started reading Brothers K, and I was just like, who cares?
Yeah.
And I don't know if it was, maybe I'll give it a try in a different translation or something, but I just was so uninterested.
Part of my opinion is compounded by modern social media. It's one of those things where on Bookstagram or Book Talk or whatever platform you're using, you see, someone's holding the book so you can't see what it is. And it's like a faceless video. It's like, read this book if you want to 10x your income, or read this book if you want to never be manipulated by people. And it doesn't matter who the creator is or whatever, it's going to be like one of 5 books in that category.
Right.
There's people just rehashing the same stuff over and over again. And that's like, for me, when it comes to like literature, book, social, it's always like Dostoevsky.
Yeah.
It's like he's put on such a pedal. He's so hyped. And what I think is funny is like people get so mad when I say he's overrated. It's like overrated doesn't mean bad.
Right.
It just means overrated. It means people are rating him as like the greatest author of all time. And I just don't agree with that. He can still be very good and not be the greatest of all time, And
Right.
so I think for me, like when I went into reading the books, it's a combination of there's something about his writing style I just do not enjoy. And you add the super, super hype to it, and the expectation was just blown out of proportion.
Yeah. Something about that happened with, I remembered with Crime and Punishment, feeling that, a lot of the kind of monologue style to the writing and the way some of it was just kind of drawn out descriptions, things like that. It really added to the tension. Like for me, it really added to what Raskolnikov was like feeling and experiencing. Like the consequences were breathing down on his neck, and just like I said, the overall tension that all the characters were facing. Like I felt like the style really added to that. And then when I got to the Brothers K, it was just so boring to me.
Yeah.
I was like, let's get to the point. Like I was like 300 pages in and nothing had happened yet.
Yeah.
The most exciting part was the brothers, the patriarch of the Karamazov being like drunk at dinner and talking about what a scoundrel he is.
Yeah.
Like who cares?
Yeah. Yeah.
Is how I felt for most of the book.
It's also compounded for me by the fact that it is like a cliche, like pseudo intellectual.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I've read Dostoevsky. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like it's the greatest novel ever written. And it's just like, if you like it and it's your favorite novel, cool. That's great.
Right.
But like, I don't know, man. It's that lit bro starter pack.
Yeah.
You know what
And
I
I
mean?
think, I think I said this when we like recorded our first episode. We were talking about like how to get into reading or a starting point for like, more difficult books. And I still think Dostoevsky is up there. I mean, if you pick it up and you don't like it, whatever, but like he's one of those authors where there's just always going to be so much discourse. Like you can read Dostoevsky and, you know, there's always going to be someone that's talking about it somewhere.
Right. For sure.
You know,
Yeah.
like you can always get more perspective on it.
And I do understand why people like it.
Right.
So let me be clear about that. But it's just, and I was talking to Seth about this waste mailing list on Insta, who reads the most obscure literature.
Right.
And if you want to talk about reading, you know, checking off lists, he's probably more well read than anybody we know as far as this stuff. But I forget how he phrased it, but he's something about like Dostoevsky's delivery being too like Hammer-like or something. And I forget exactly what he said. I should go back and pull it up. It was a while ago, but it was just like, yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah. And a lot of that too could come down to translation, like how it's translated is going to make a big difference. But look, I'm not going to learn Russian, so
right.
I'm a slave to.
I mean, when you've got the debt collector breathing down your neck and you just gambled away all your life's belongings, like I would imagine your writing style is pretty Hammer-like.
Yeah, for sure.
So
moving on,
yeah,
Lolita
let's
by
hammer through this list
by Nabokov. I've not read,
but
I'm very well familiar with it. The Secret Garden, I don't think I've read.
Who's that by?
Frances Hodgson Burnett.
No.
Scoop by Evelyn Waugh.
2 Evelyn Waughs on the list, huh?
You've
never read
A Tale of Two Cities by Dickens. I read that as an adult.
Haven't read that.
Diary of a Nobody by George Grossmith.
Never heard of it.
Me either. It came out in 1892. Interesting.
Pass.
Anna Karenina by Tolstoy. I have not read. I've The Betrothed by Alessandro Manzoni.
Haven't read.
Me either. 1827. It's old.
Pass.
You're not a 19th century guy at all.
No, not.
Orlando by Virginia Woolf. I
haven't read.
Atlas Shrugged, Ayn Rand.
Boo.
Not interested in reading.
Boo.
The Time Machine by H.G. Wells. I feel like we did it in high school, but I can't remember.
We might have talked about War of the Worlds in high school, but I don't think we read it.
The Art of War by Sun Tzu. I've read it as an adult.
What is this doing on this list?
Yeah. The Forsyte Saga by John Galsworthy.
Haven't heard of it.
Me either. Travels with Charlie. I actually have not read that one. That's a nonfiction by Steinbeck.
Nope.
Tropic of Cancer by Henry Miller.
Haven't read it.
Me either. Women in Love by D.H. Lawrence.
Haven't read it.
Me either. Staying On by Paul Scott.
Haven't heard of it.
Came out in 1977. So maybe we should take our own advice and read more modern classics.
Jesus Christ.
The Wind in the Willows by Kenneth Graham.
I haven't heard of it.
1908. I've never heard of it either. My Antonia by Willa Cather.
Haven't heard of it. Might be over there on the shelf. I know I have some Willa Cather over there.
Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte.
No.
Perfume by Patrick Suskind.
Nope.
It was 1985. That's interesting. War and Peace. I haven't read that either. I've only read some short stories by Tolstoy.
Yeah.
Of Human Bondage by Somerset. I don't even know how to say that last name.
I haven't read it.
Mom. Bleak House by Dickens. I do have on my shelf, but I haven't read. I want to read that this year. Actually, you haven't read that.
Haven't. No.
Lost Illusions by Honoré de Balzac. Neither. Breakfast of Champions by Vonnegut. I have not read.
I think I read. I DNF'd it. I think.
A Christmas Carol by Dickens. I did that in high school.
Probably maybe did that in high school.
I need glasses. Silas Marner by George Eliot.
No. Damn, a lot of Eliot on there.
Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf.
Nope. Haven't read any Woolf.
Little Women by Louisa May Alcott.
Nope.
Not me either. The Sea by Iris Murdoch.
Nope.
I have that on my shelf. I haven't read it yet.
Damn, this is a tough look for the Life on Books podcast.
We like what we like.
Yeah.
This isn't Life on Classes. It's Life on Books. Man.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, if you put together the list of all the books you and I have read, I guarantee people, like the general reading public, has probably only read 10% of it. So,
Well, I think that How much more is on this list?
We're on 83, so
Okay,
we're almost
all
there.
right, all right. We'll finish it up, and then I'll make my point.
Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, I have read. I don't remember if it was a high school assignment or not. The Castle by Kafka.
Haven't read any Kafka.
I, Claudius by Robert Graves. I wouldn't read that based on his memoir of World War I. I did not think it was good. Goodbye to all that. Peter Pan. I don't think I ever read the book. What the fuck? Yeah, I don't know. A Confederacy of Dunces. You've read that.
I've read that.
You didn't like it.
But it was okay.
Yeah.
Like I didn't dislike it.
Yeah.
The main character, Ignatius, is kind of obnoxious, which is kind of the point. But like, I wasn't crazy about it.
Lark Rise to Candleford by Flora Thompson.
Never heard of it.
Me either. The Return of the Native by Thomas Hardy. I haven't read any Hardy.
No.
Portrait of an Artist of a Young Man.
I've not read that.
I've
read some Joyce, but not that.
I've read half of that.
I would like to read that.
It's okay. I didn't put it down because I wasn't liking it. It's like a catch-22 situation where something else. I got something else and I was like, "Ooh, I want to read this." I just didn't get back to it. The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. I've not read.
Neither have I.
I guess they're teaching that in high school now, commonly. What a Carve Up.
Surprised they're letting kids read that.
I know. What a Carve Up by Jonathan Coe.
Nope.
1994. The Godfather by Mario Puzo.
That's weird to be on that. No.
I straight up, this is maybe surprising to some people, I did not know this was a book until like a couple years ago.
I also learned pretty recently that it was based off a book.
Yeah.
And actually, you know how I found out? I was at Old Number 6.
Yeah.
And I was looking to see if they had anything by Pynchon.
Oh, right. P-U-P-Y.
And I was like, no way. The Godfather's a book?
Yeah. I mean, the movie's like such a cinematic masterpiece. So, Sweet Francis by Irene Nemirovsky, 2004. So some new stuff on here. One Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich by Alexander Solzhenitsyn.
I've read that.
You have?
Yeah.
Did you read it in high school?
No.
Was it good?
It was okay.
All right.
I think my thing with it was maybe my expectations were a little too high, not necessarily for the quality of the book, but I remember like reading somewhere like it was this like scathing expose of what it was like to be in a Soviet work camp.
Right.
And it was that description was probably used closer to like when it came out and less was known about what it was like in a Soviet work camp.
Yeah.
But it sounded awful, but it was everything I expected. Like I don't want to say I didn't learn anything, but it wasn't like, oh, wow, I didn't know it was that bad.
Right.
Like they got fed like crap. They barely got any food. The food they ate was watered down and stale and terrible. And they worked like dogs and they slept in terrible conditions and they were,
yeah, it's what you expect.
Right.
Number 99 on this list is White Nights by Dostoevsky. I've never heard of that one. And 100 is Hard Times by Charles Dickens, which I have not read.
Wow, a lot of Dickens on there.
That's not too surprising. Okay, so judge us. Go for it. So we made a list, top 10 authors.
Well, I just want to say real quick, 'cause
yeah.
I started to say this and then I wanted to get to the end of the list. Like, neither one of us we both had a lot of no's on that list, an overwhelming number of no's. I think the going back to what it means to be well read, like if you go just based on that list, like I think a lot of people like a list like that is a good entry point into someone that wants to read more. That's what I did. That's how I found Gravity's Rainbow and some of these other books that are here behind me, just like Googling 100 best books, things like that. And like, but I think if you are, you just, I have to read all 100 of these books, you're going to end up like, I'm just checking off of the list and things like that. But like, if Excuse me. We both had a lot of no's on there, but we're able to, I'd like to think, have some pretty good discussions about books.
For sure.
Both just like when we're hanging out, watching fights or whatever, talking about what we're reading, or like right now, like we're on the air.
Yeah.
Like I was saying earlier, like we are able to converse about books and what we're reading on a deeper than surface level. And I think that brings you closer to the well-read. Like if you just base it off of some list or X number of lists, you're always going to be short of books. And I think it comes back to, instead of having like, trying to read everything on the Western canon, like you have to develop your own personal canon.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
Whether it's, you pick a select few books that were like hugely influential on you, and, everything you've read can be tied back to those, or like, however it is, like you have like your own books that like have led to so many other things. I mean, apologies to the readers. I'm going to bring it up again and you're going to have to take another shot, but like so much of what I've read just in my personal life in the last few years can in some way be tied back to Gravity's Rainbow.
Right.
Like and some of it was just like things where like I heard about it tangentially through reading Pynchon. Like I found out about Gas and Gaddis because I looked up like other authors similar to Thomas Pynchon.
Right.
And then there were other things that, something indirect like that, or something directly where like I read something that I came across within Gravity's Rainbow that I was like, I want to find out more about this, or things just kind of come back to that. So
yeah,
I think it comes back to kind of having your own personal canon, so to speak.
Yeah, I think I looked it up one time, and there's been an estimated like 3 million books ever published, essentially. And so you figure, let's say at 14 years old is when you can really start to read serious literature, like adult literature.
Right.
And the average person in America lives to 77. So that's 63 years of reading. I mean, I would say at the absolute most, the most amount of really, we'll call them serious books you could read in a year and really absorb them is probably on average, like we'll call it 50. And I think that's being generous even.
Yeah.
So 63 years at 50 books a year, that's 3,100 books.
Yeah.
That's not many. And
I would love to read that many books though, like that.
Right. But that's a fraction of a percent of 3 million.
Right.
And so you have all these people who have carved out this list of like, these are the ones that you are supposed to read to be well read, or I think everyone should read, or whatever it is. And it's like, well, I can check off some of those, but what about the stuff I want to read just because I want to read it?
Right.
Or the stuff that is coming out now that just isn't well known. And I always talk about music so much on this podcast, but like how many bands were incredible that just never got record deals, you know? There's this artist, Terry Reid. He was an artist back in the 60s and 70s, and he had this song called Seed of Memory, and it kind of got resurfaced because it was featured on one of the movies that Rob Zombie made. Mm-hmm. It was on the soundtrack, and the song is killer. If you like, that kind of like 60s, 70s rock, you'll love it. And the guy, he's British, and he was asked to be the front man for this band back in the 60s or whatever. And he was like, nah, I'm kind of doing my own thing. Well, that band ended up being Led Zeppelin. And it's like, And if you actually hear the guy sing, he does sound like Robert Plant from Led Zeppelin. And it's like, you know, that guy missed out on being one of the most famous one of the most famous rock bands of all time. That doesn't mean he's not as good as Led Zeppelin. Like he had the opportunity to be in the band. At the time, they were just like a local band.
Right.
And he just passed on it because his career was already a little bit further along than theirs was. And, you know, who knows, like, had he joined the band, like, maybe Led Zeppelin would not have become Led Zeppelin. But, you know, it's just like this artist kind of lost to time is just as good as anything that was coming out of that era.
Right.
So I think of books the same way. And it's like, can you really say, like, a modern Pulitzer winner or Nobel winner is not as good as, you know, Middlemarch? Like, I don't know. I mean, you could make the case, like, Middlemarch came first. It's like more original, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But it's okay. I don't know. I still like and appreciate the modern work. And perhaps it's tackling a topic that's more pertinent to what's happening now or whatever. So, yeah. So we both made lists of like top 10 books or authors we haven't read that we want to read or may surprise people that we haven't read. We kind of probably hit on some of them already in that list, but we'll go back and forth and we'll just speed run through this. So who's...
So I coincidentally, without even I kind of just made my list last night.
Same, yeah.
Without intending to do so. I have 5 books and 5 authors.
Okay.
I evenly split it up. So my first I haven't read and would like to is Moby Dick. Just, you know, I don't feel like there's much to say about why I would like to read that.
Sure.
And I'm sure a lot of people's eyes, the great American novel.
Yeah.
Very influential on some of my more modern favorites. So
it's a polarizing book for sure. People either seem to love it or hate it. Most of mine are authors. Marcel Proust.
That's like a good pick. Yeah.
Super famous, well-respected name that I've never read anything from.
Yeah.
What do you have next?
Dickens. I've never read any Dickens.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, man. You should read A Tale of Two Cities. It's not a super hard read. It's not super long. I think. Yeah. Right there. That's your mission by the end of the year.
Okay.
I've never read anything by the Bronte sisters.
Okay. I haven't either. I don't really have any desire to.
It's like a little bit of a cheat for me because it's technically 2 people.
Ooh,
so.
There you go.
Yeah.
Nabokov. I've never read any Nabokov, and I would really like to.
Yeah.
A lot of people I'm friends with online really enjoy his work.
I mean, certainly a more modern Russian author.
Yeah.
I put Shakespeare on here. It's one of those things where we certainly studied a lot of Shakespeare through various years of school, but I don't know that I've ever like sat down and like read Hamlet or whatever it is, whatever play. Mostly just because I didn't like what I experienced. Because in school it was more. We never like did anything front to back. It was always like studying one particular facet of it or whatever.
Yeah.
I didn't really particularly enjoy it.
When I was in high school, I did. I remember Romeo and Juliet when I was a freshman. I remember Macbeth. I don't remember what year.
Yeah.
And I think we read Hamlet. I think those both might have been in my AP Lit class. And I think we looked at some of his sonnets.
I feel like a lot of people have like one play that they were like, I never liked Shakespeare until I read this one. And then I like fell in love with it.
Yeah.
And it's like a little different for everybody. So maybe I'll have that experience.
Bill Shakespeare.
Yeah. What else you got?
Kafka. Never read any Kafka.
Metamorphosis, man. It's like, I don't know, 50 pages.
Yeah. So I have his complete stories and at least one of his novels.
Yeah.
Over there.
D.H. Lawrence.
I've never read any. And when I have read it, he seemed like he was a real horny old guy.
Yeah.
He was one of the first that I think was really starting to bring sex into his novels. So.
Yeah. All right, what do you got next?
John Barth.
He just passed away, right?
He did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
One of the authors out of the kind of Pynchon, Gaddis,
that postmodern.
Vonnegut,
Yeah.
postmodern, very experimental and inventive. So got a handful of his books over there behind me.
Number 6 on my list is Henry James. Haven't read anything by him.
Okay. I got Ulysses. It's kind of the same thing as Moby Dick, aside from Great American Novel.
I don't know that I honestly have any real desire to do it. I think I gave you my copy of it.
You did, yeah. Yeah.
I think like when we talked with Krista, I mean, she's extremely well read, obviously.
Yeah.
And she teaches English and literature. And she's like, I did it once. That was good enough. Like, never again. Not interested.
Yeah.
Didn't enjoy it.
I think that, like, that one's not high up on my list.
Yeah.
Like, if I had to pick between the two, Ulysses or Moby Dick, I think Moby Dick would be a little bit, at least right now, kind of my more of that choice for me. As much as I've gone against it, or this idea in the last hour and 20 minutes,
Yeah.
I do have some books that, like, I would like to read just to check off that box.
Yeah.
Ulysses is one of them.
Mhm.
Like, you know, without Ulysses, like, so many of my favorite books would not exist.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, like, not that I, like, owe it to Joyce to read anything, but I think, like, in terms of that, you know, broader, well-read aspect, like,
Yeah.
plus I know a lot. I have talked to a lot of people that just flat out really loved it. So,
Grapes of Wrath by Steinbeck. That's one that I think surprises people that I haven't read, and one that I do really want to read. I've read East of Eden, Of Mice and Men, The Pearl, A Russian Journal, Cannery Row, Sweet Thursday.
yeah.
But that's just one I haven't gotten to.
Well, I hope your experience is better than mine.
Yeah.
Next up for me, I have Toni Morrison.
Oh, I have Toni Morrison on my list also.
Yeah.
Yeah. I haven't
Like
read
I-
anything by her.
Like I've only read Beloved. I don't think if and when I get around to reading more of her work, I would start there.
Mhm.
I think somewhere around here, maybe not. There is a copy of Song of Solomon. So that would probably be my pick. But
Number 4 on my list is Donna Tartt / The Secret History. A lot of people kind of consider her as like one of those authors that will be considered classics in the future, classic writer in the future. And obviously, The Secret History gets a lot of shine, so I'd be curious to read that.
yeah, like I said, I really enjoyed it when I read it. It's been so long that I don't really remember like anything about the quality of the writing. I just remember being like really engrossed in it and really enjoying it, and then feeling the total opposite when I got around to The Goldfinch, because that book is boring as hell.
What do you have next on your list?
Satanic Verses.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Rushdie, yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
It's, again, kind of not really something where I'm like looking to check off a box, but I think anything as renowned as that. And I think if you write a book so controversial that the Ayatollah puts a hit out on your life, like to the point that it's so like people are still trying to, I mean, he was attacked,
year.
that was pretty recent. Like
Last
that,
year, the year
yeah,
before,
last
I think.
year. Like that's not like, I mean, I forget what year, I don't remember what year the book came out, but it's not like
the 80s.
it's not like the controversy died down within like
Right.
10 years. I mean, here we are 40 years later,
Right.
and he's being attacked in public for it.
Yeah.
Like physically attacked. Like that there has to be something there behind the book. Like I would like to see what all the fuss is about.
Yeah. Let's look it up.
The 80s sounds right.
I think it was like 86 or something. 88.
I mean, the whole, I think it was Penguin or Random House or whoever, like their whole building was under security.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't like just like Rushdie was the one being hunted. Like
Right.
it was anything and anybody related to that book, like, was on high alert and under constant protection.
Yeah. So number 2 on my list is Don DeLillo. I haven't read any DeLillo yet, which he's a highly rated author, but not super popular. So like casual readers might be like, who?
Yeah, I'm excited for you to get around to reading some DeLillo.
I'll do it this year.
I
for
think
sure.
you'll really enjoy it, and I think I've said this before, but like out of that group of authors that he gets roped in with, Pynchon's, whoever, everyone knows what I'm talking about. He's the gang. Yeah. His work is fairly accessible.
Yeah.
Who
you got next, or what you have?
I have got Women and Men by Joseph McElroy.
I don't even know what that is.
He is a lesser known author amongst the postmodernists. Like I said, lesser known, fairly reclusive guy.
So he's a foot soldier for the gang.
Yeah. Lesser known author, reclusive guy. A lot of his work is out of print, so it's a lot harder to come by. Women and Men is that blue 1,000-page brick right there. I think it's actually closer to like 1,200.
Cool.
But he's another one where I've talked to I found out through Bookstagram. Talked to a lot of people on there a handful of people on there who like really love his work. So
cool.
Would like to get around to it.
The last thing I have on my list is Stephen King.
Oh, that's a good one.
Never read any Stephen King, which is surprising to a lot of people and myself. I mean, he's obviously one of the most famous authors of all time, prolific.
Yeah. From
New England. I'm just not much of a horror guy.
Yeah.
So
I think that's a good one for the list. I could probably put that on mine as well.
Yeah.
My last pick, grab it, is this guy right here, The Lost Scrapbook by Evan Dara. This one, what's really interesting to me more, it's more so the lore behind it. So no one knows who Evan Dara is.
Oh.
No one knows if it's a man or a woman. I can't think of any of them off the top of my head, but there were a lot of people that thought it was like some other already prolific author publishing under a pseudonym. I might be wrong, but if I'm recalling correctly, the manuscript just showed up at William Vollmann's house one day.
Okay.
Like, here you go. Here's
Yeah.
this book. Just again, kind of one of those things where like, I mean, I've heard good things about the book itself, but just the kind of whole overarching story and lore surrounding it really draws me in.
That's cool.
So,
anything else on your list?
I think that was everything.
All right. So we'll wrap this up. I want to conclude by saying I got an interesting comment on my bookshelf tour video this week of my fiction. Someone said, so you only read 98% men. And first of all, anytime somebody starts a statement with so, you can guarantee whatever's coming next is a misrepresentation of reality. Or when anyone says, so what you're saying is, it's like, nope.
What happened was.
Yeah. What I'm saying is what I'm saying, not whatever wood chipper you're putting it into and spin it on the other side. So anyway, yeah. And one thing I want to say about that is I actually went through my entire, every book I've logged in Goodreads, and about 15% of it was female authors. Now, a couple things about that. Number one is I've only, I would say, religiously using Goodreads, and that's an exaggeration of my use of it, for about 2 years. So it's certainly not a representation of everything I've read in my life. Secondly, I did a little bit of research, and it's hard to pin down an exact number of how many books have been published by men versus women. But for a long time, it was not easy for women to publish books. So if the best guess I can get is somewhere between 10 and 20% of basically all books published have been by men, historically speaking. So my collection is pretty on par with that, which I'm fairly proud of. I want to say that I do think it's important to read a variety, like we've already talked about. And what that means can be a lot of different things. I've read works from women, men, trans people, indigenous people, people from other countries. And I think that's good to do. However, don't push your standards on somebody else in terms of like quota.
Right.
If you see someone that's read anything, never read anything other than straight white dudes, sure. Maybe that person could branch out a little bit. I would say that person could branch out.
Right.
But it's like when you've read, you have read at least a little bit diversely. Okay, clearly this person thinks I've only read 2% women, and that's not high enough for them. Maybe their threshold is 10%, and there's probably people out there that think that's not enough. They think it should be 50-50. So it's like, honestly, shut the fuck up.
Yeah, I because you messaged me about this comment.
Yeah.
And here's my stance on it. And I might get for our like 6 listeners. Hopefully none of them put me in hot water for this, but like
You're getting canceled.
You're right. I don't think we're popular enough to like get canceled, but this might do it.
Pre-canceled.
Right. This is like 4 years from now when we're like big and famous. Like someone's going to pull this episode up and be like, nope, these guys suck.
It'll happen.
I think, the overwhelming majority of books I've read have been by men. The overwhelming majority of books surrounding us in this room are written by men. The overwhelming majority of books I'm going to read in the foreseeable future are probably going to be by men. And I don't care. Like I don't care. That life is too short to read anything other than what you want to read.
Yeah.
And
I agree.
Like, I don't want to like try to like spin this into the I don't think I'm a sexist person. Like,
so that's the difference, right? Like you are not purposely excluding things.
I'm not going to sit here and be like, women are bad writers. I don't think they should.
Right.
I don't think they should be allowed to publish books. I don't think they should be allowed to, things like that. Like, I like the type of books that I like. Unfortunately, for whatever reasons that are outside of my control, most of the types of books I like to read are written by men.
Right.
And I'm not going to like change my ways and read different books just to read more books written by women so I can appease some random stranger on the internet.
Particularly when you've already read books by women.
Right.
Or people of color or whatever category it is. Like, I do think it is important to expose yourself to different voices. I've made content about this because there was this thing going around on TikTok about this woman that was like, don't you fucking tell me what to read. And it's just like, it was a little bit different because it was like very, very clearly narrow frame of mind.
Right.
But it's like, I just was, again, it goes back to like quotas.
Right.
It's like, yeah, read a variety of stuff, but, and you should expose yourself to new ideas. But if like you truly enjoy this one particular genre and it happens to be written by men, it's okay if 98% of it that's what you read.
Right. And you know what the other thing is too? Like, there have been so many times where I've either started reading a book or been at the bookstore, and whether it's the title, the cover, whatever, something has caught my eye about the book, and I go to pick it up, and it's a book written by a man with a female protagonist. I have zero interest in reading that. I like when I had when I had COVID, someone told me like, oh, you should try to read 1Q84 or whatever Murakami's brick is. They were like, it's kind of a page turner. It's not too difficult comprehension wise. Like if you're just sitting reading, like you can put a good chunk in it. Like I think I read like 40, 50 pages, and there are at least like 4 or 5 times where he just completely, for no reason, sexualizes female characters without any. That doesn't move the plot forward in any way. It doesn't contribute to the narrative in any way. If you cut those out, like it wouldn't change anything.
Right.
I don't want to read like that.
Yeah.
Like I don't want to read a coming of age story about a teenage girl who lost her mother and needs to find her way in life, written by a dude.
Right. Especially one that's notorious for not knowing how to write women.
Or just like in general. Like I like, I've read descriptions of like heard people like talking about a book, and then I like go and read the description, and it's a book by a man, and it's about this like the protagonist is a woman, and it's about like some romantic affair she's caught up in, and I'm like, why would I want to read that?
Yeah.
Like it's
I mean,
if even if it's well written, it's still just kind of, to quote Gen Z, kind of gives me the ick. Like I don't like, I'm just like, I would rather read Pynchon making jokes than some Hungarian guy writing about some woman falling in love with her landlord. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I appreciate that for sure.
And but to bring it back around, like it's not like I would turn away a book because it was written by a woman, but I'm also not going to read a book just because it was written by a woman.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I certainly have looked at my collection and be like, I would like to read more female authors because they do bring a different, I do feel like they do bring a different kind of approach a lot of times to writing.
Right.
But I'm not going to pick up a book just because it's written by a woman. It still needs to, check some other boxes for me in terms of my interest and is it, a well-written book or considered a well-written book. And again, like both you and I have read books by women, by people of color, by people who are probably not straight. So that, but it's, the quota thing just kind of kills me. It's like, I don't know when, like everyone has different standards. So when is it satisfied?
Right.
And then at what point are you sacrificing the quality of what you're reading
just to read,
just to check the boxes? And this is my big beef with the book totals, not, reading X amount of books per year. It's like, oh, I'm falling behind on my goal. Time to read some shorter books so I can, check that box. So it's got to be a balancing act. But the really funny thing about that comment was like, literally the first book I pointed out was by a female author. It was Chimamanda Adichie, she's Nigerian. And it's like, I think that whole shelf, like my A's, there's 2 books by her. There's like Jane Austen. I think that one shelf is like mostly women.
Yeah.
Just like,
I'm looking at this shelf behind you to see what I can, most of the Dalkies are men. I think there's maybe 2 in there that are women. One of the deep vellums in there is written by a woman.
And I mean, bringing it back to this book here, we don't even know.
Right. I think one of my NYRBs is written by either a woman or a trans person. I can't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah. Non-binary.
Non-binary.
Right. I mean, that's the other thing too. You think about how women have been treated historically throughout society. I wouldn't be surprised if there's literature out there under men's names that was actually written by women. We just don't know.
Also, I'm prepared to spend an obscene amount of money to travel back in time and marry Clarice Lispector. So don't tell me that I don't read enough women.
That's right. You're a big Lispector fan. So
love Clarice Lispector.
Yeah.
Everybody should read Lispector. So
there you go. All right. Those are cancelable takes right there.
yeah.
I mean, look, I'm a huge proponent of broadening your horizons, but don't put quotas on people. Guys,
No,
right?
read what you like to read and let that guide you into where you're going next.
Yeah.
Because then you'll get enjoyment out of it. You'll be able to have conversations. You will give a shit about what you're reading and not just like, if you don't like Dickens, don't read Dickens because he's on every list.
Right. Right.
Like, you're not going to be an interesting person because you read what was on a list. You're going to be a guy who read things that are on a list.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
You're going to be an interesting person by reading things that you care about and can have share interesting thoughts about.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's to take it back to the topic. That makes you well read.
Yeah.
In my opinion. It doesn't matter the amount of books you've read, the type of books you've read. To me, it matters what kind of conversations you can have about what you read.
I like it.
And how it adds to your perspective of the world as a whole.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good definition.
That's what it comes down to me. How does what you read shape who you are as a person and the way you look at the world, and how do you talk about those things?
Yeah. Well, you converted me from a nihilistic opinion on being well-read to being well-read means being a good conversationalist about books. How's that?
Perfect.
All right. That concludes this episode, I think. See you guys
next time.
We have some guests coming up, so be on the lookout. All right. Thanks for listening to our shenanigans.
Get out of my house.